Hello, this is Tales of Dread. Tonight, we're going to tell you some scary stories from real camping trips. So have fun and remember to like, share, and subscribe. The plan was for it to be a fun trip. We were all going back to school soon, and Tyler didn't want us to lose our freedom without one last party. To be honest, I wasn't too interested in the whole thing. All summer, we'd been to parties, short trips, and of course, our week-long vacation. I was going to take a week off, but my boyfriend Austin insisted that we go. He had always liked being outside. I like the woods. Don't get me wrong, I mean it. But all I wanted was a nice night in with a movie, maybe some ice cream and a lot of sleep. But he's always been a real energizer bunny, full of endless energy and almost as much optimism. We were going to be the only ones there. Tyler, his girlfriend, Austin and I made a promise that we would stay in next week and do something more low-key. It took him a while to get me to agree, but I finally did. I still remember how happy he looked. He kissed me on the head and told me I'd love it, even though I'd been camping before. They decided to camp at a park in the Appalachians that I had never heard of. So I did a quick Google search right away to find out what I was getting into. I'm not one for surprises. I like to know what I'm getting into, and the pictures gave me a good idea of what to expect. We could even go swimming in a lake, and I was always up for a good time in the water. Of course, Tyler was going to bug me about fishing because he thinks it's fun to pull slimy, wet animals out of the water. I decided right then that Austin would fish for me, so I could do what I wanted. It took about 2 hours to get to the campsite, which was on a fairly flat hilltop surrounded by thick bushes. The boys were smart enough to choose a spot with a small gazebo and 2 grills that looked like they had been there forever. Why do they always have to be so old and rusty? I remember that Charity and Tyler were setting up their tent when I heard them talking. Once the sun goes down, we won't be able to see anything. I could hear the fear in her voice. Babe, she had always been afraid of the dark. It will work out. He pointed in the direction of the fire pit in the middle of the campsite. A fire can be started. I also brought enough lanterns and flashlights to make this place look like the Strip in Las Vegas. Let's hope so. This place is great. Tyler laughed while he put a tent stake in the ground. In Vegas, I've always had good luck. I bet I'm going to get lucky here too. She gave a grin. Lucky, eh? We'll see, I say to Austin, who was trying to figure out what the bad pictures on the side of the tent bag meant. Let's make sure our tent isn't right next to theirs. He turned to look at me with a grin that made me both mad and happy. Why? I planned to put us right next to each other. What if I just want to be able to sleep well for once? I don't see any train tracks for some damn train to come down at 4 in the morning, and I want to take advantage of that, but we can't let them be alone. I gave him a punch to the shoulder. Shut up! They'll be fine on their own, I'm sure. He was happy. I can still hear it in my mind. It's one of my all-time favorite sounds. I wish I could go back and change what happened, but I didn't know what was going to happen. A few hours later, I was leaning against Austin and sitting by the fire, watching the flames dance brilliantly. The moon was mostly hidden by clouds, so there was a thick blanket of darkness all around us. Tyler had killed and cooked one of the trout or bass he had caught. I can't tell which is which. He offered to cook dinner for all of us, but I didn't want to eat fish that had just been caught in the lake. A lake we don't know very much about wasn't my thing. I ate what I had brought with me. Austin took him up on his offer and was eating the rest of the piece he was given for dinner. You know, bro, this isn't that bad. Your whole Bear Grylls thing might be onto something. So it's starting to turn out, huh? He stopped him by putting up his hand. No, I only said that the food was tasty. I'm not trying to learn how to find food in the woods and do other things to stay alive. Tyler took another bite and talked while his mouth was still too full. Hey, you never know when this could be useful. It might help. I rolled my eyes in irritation and turned up the music to drown them out. He could talk for hours about how to stay alive and even how to eat rattlesnakes. Instead, I looked at the forest, or at least what I could see of it. The trees moved slowly in the light breeze. It's a soft whisper that floats through the air and makes it feel almost peaceful. Still, something didn't seem right. I paid close attention. I didn't know what it was, but something didn't seem right. The only thing you could hear in the forest was the wind. There were no crickets or frogs making noise. At the edge of the clearing, maybe 50 feet away, a bush rustled and for a split second I thought I saw a shadow. Maybe a small person went further into the bush. Feeling a little cold inside all of a sudden, I squinted and looked again to see what it was. I saw nothing. I thought I was making it up. At the same time, over the sound of the fire, Tyler was in the middle of a lively talk about something. Wouldn't believe it, man. But it seems like scary stories from 500 years ago are told about every place like this. Austin seemed to be interested. What sorts of stories can't we tell? Charity gave a huff. Everyone knows that I don't like the dark. I want to be able to close my eyes and sleep well tonight. Tyler smirked at her. We were planning on sleeping. She told him to shut up and hit him on the leg. I agreed that it was funny for him to bother her. We looked at the fire for a moment in silence before I stood up. I don't know about you three, but I like going for a swim at night. This sounds great right now. You can all come with Charity if you want to. When she moved quickly toward her boyfriend and grabbed his hand, he just shrugged and said, "Sorry." Austin got up and looked great. "I'll follow you, honey. I know that kind of sound." I put a hand on his arm to calm him down. "The lake is just down the hill, but you don't have to go there if you don't want to." "I'll be fine. Are you sure?" I nodded. "He sure?" I nodded. He gave me a shrug and sat down. "When that happens, I'll probably be down a little later." Damn! In the light of the fire, he looked very good. I bent over and kissed him, and then I started walking toward the lake. It wasn't even that far away, maybe 60 or 70 yards. I turned on my flashlight and started pushing through the underbrush in the forest. Why wasn't there a path there already? I started to get a strange feeling almost right away. I felt like someone was watching me. I nervously looked around and shone my flashlight into the dark woods on both sides, but I didn't see anything. No, I don't shine at all. Even though the feeling didn't go away, I kept going. I quickly took off my shorts and shirt on the shore and waded into the water, leaving my clothes and flashlight turned off. At the surface, the water was warm, but as you went deeper, it got cooler. I took a deep breath and enjoyed the smell of the fresh air. I swam out into the water and rolled over onto my back. I huffed in frustration because the night sky. I wanted to see the stars because we couldn't really see them in the city, but I forgot about the clouds. At least the moon is there to talk to. I thought to myself, I don't know how long I was in the water, maybe 15 minutes, but my mind started to wander quickly. I was glad I came, even though it sucked to sleep in a tent. It had been a while since I'd been able to get away from technology and back into nature. We were alone in the woods. I stopped to think about it. I opened my eyes, lifted my head, and looked back at the tree line. The only odd thing was how quiet it was. It wasn't just quiet in the forest. No one spoke. I didn't like how it made me feel the more I thought about it. I swam back to shore, grabbed the flashlight, turned it on, and shone it again into the woods. No, if you shine a light into the woods, the eyes of insects, spiders, and other animals usually light up like little fireflies. I couldn't come up with a single instance. At least I hadn't seen any eyes shine in the woods. More and more of that feeling started to come back. When I stepped on a stick, it hurt like hell. So I went back to my room and put on my shoes. Then I looked for bugs or anything else in the bushes, logs, and branches. I probably took a few minutes to do it. Nothing. That feeling from before was getting stronger, like something was watching me in the shadows and getting closer. I tried not to notice. It was just my imagination, but it felt like the air around me was squeezing my neck. Then I was sure I saw something, a dark shadow hiding behind a downed tree far away. As fear crept in, my stomach got tighter. I must have been hallucinating because I wanted to yell for Austin or Tyler to come down here. I took a few deep breaths to calm down, and then started walking toward the campsite. I thought about going back to get my clothes and phone, but that feeling was getting stronger, and I was trying hard not to freak out about nothing. I was sure that the darkness was getting denser and heavier. I started walking quickly, and then almost ran until I got through the trees. I had a small cut on my shin that was bleeding a little, but I didn't care and walked right up to the group. Still, they were crowded around the campfire. "Austin, guys, I'm feeling weird right now." The others just looked at me. "What are you saying, Ollie?" I inhaled deeply. I felt a little safer when I got out of the woods and was with the guys, but I couldn't get rid of that bad feeling in my gut. Austin. I think he may have noticed something I saw out there. He quickly got up and saw something. "What are you saying?" I felt really stupid all of a sudden. I probably looked like a nervous schoolgirl again because I kept looking away and grabbing my arm. I'm not sure. I saw something like a shadow, so something like a fox. Tyler, something like a fox, Tyler referred. I gave a head shake. No, not like that. It was dark, and it was hard to say what it was like. Charity spoke up, and her voice had a note of worry to it. That sounds a lot like the story you were telling us, don't you think? Before I could say anything, I looked at him with hope. He stood up and put his hands up while shaking his hair. Look, you probably saw a small animal like a possum or something like that. It's no big deal. There are a lot of animals in this area. We don't have to be scared of some silly ghost story. He put his hand on Charity's shoulder and squeezed it to make her feel better. Also, we'll be fine as long as we stay by the fire. Right, the things he said made sense. I knew that, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that was growing in my stomach. I thought there was something dangerous out there, or at least that's what my mind told me. Look, I moved one more step closer to the fire. I'm sure it's not a big deal. But could you just take a quick look so I don't have to worry? The guys just looked at each other. In the background, the fire was still crackling. Why not? Why not? Austin went and got a flashlight. We'll find anything that's out there. Tyler's sighed against his will. Fine, we'll look into it. I'm sure that everything is going well, but I guess there's strength in numbers. While the guys walked down the hill, I sat down next to Charity. She was holding her flashlight like it was her ticket to safety. I knew we should have instead gone downtown. I chuckled. Hey, if you did that, Tyler would probably throw up on his shirt in a few hours. You know how he is when he drinks too much. Not all of this is bad. She gave me a nod and then looked me up and down. Did you leave your clothes somewhere? I felt a chill go down my back. My instincts were telling me to do something. I felt like I was being watched, or maybe I made it up. If it was my mind, it was starting to work faster and better, but it was still doing a great job. I didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing, so I just shrugged. Well, I know this is going to sound silly, but I was very nervous. I quickly took a bite. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that someone else was there. Charity's eyes widened like you were being watched. For a moment, I felt sick. At least I shook my head and tried to calm down. Look, girl, I think we're all pretty excited right now, but that's just because our ideas are rubbing off on each other. I'm sure everything will be okay. If there's anything to worry about down there, it will be found by the boys. She nervously laughed and turned back to the fire. Yeah, that's probably it, and the guys will be safe with it. I'm sure. I gave her a reassuring nod and put my hand on her back. Then I saw a shadow in the tree line and looked up. It ran away quickly. My blood ran cold. I rubbed my eyes and looked in the same direction. Nothing was visible. But the feeling of danger kept growing. The guys then came back. They moved quickly, which didn't help calm my nerves at all. Tyler took a deep breath and shook his head slightly, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Well, girls, we didn't find anything that said, "Do you kind of feel bad about all this?" Yes, we both answered at the same time while I went to talk to Austin on the other log. Tyler sat down next to his girl. Well, ladies, I'm not one to believe in superstitions, but Austin and I both feel like something bad is going to happen. So we're all going to stay safe by the fire and wait it out, okay? I thought about the dark. I kept thinking I was seeing them, but there was something wrong with what I saw. Maybe we should just give up and go back home. Charity gave a strong nod to show that she agreed. Austin's arm went around me. Look, I know it's weird, but I'm sure everything will be fine. It's just that the trees will stay put. Just try to enjoy the night, and everything will be fine. Sounds fine. I put my head on his shoulder and leaned into the bend of his arm. I gave a small nod. Even though I could feel danger coming, I felt better when I was in his arms, like everything was going to be okay, and I really did think that was the case. It was all good. I couldn't stop thinking about the shadows. Even though the s'more was tasty, it didn't make me feel better. I was just feeling worse and worse and worse. As time went on, I could tell from the other people's faces that they were glad Tyler had suggested we make campfire treats to take our minds off the bougie men. Still, I felt worse, and I could tell they felt the same way. Even Tyler was quiet, and instead of being his usual happy self, he moved his weight around aimlessly. I've been trying to work up the courage to go get my stuff from the lake, but as I waited, the woods became less appealing. I finally gave in mentally. I didn't want to be a chicken, but my fear was stronger than my pride. Guys, could someone go get my things? By the water, I left my clothes and phone. At this point, I was still in my wet bikini. After a while, I just wanted to get my clothes back. Tyler took a deep breath and stood up. Sure, I'll get it. But first, he ran to his tent and opened the zipper. I'm going to use my strongest weapons. A minute later, he came back out with a lantern, a flashlight, and a knife. He attached the knife and the flashlight to his belt and lit the lantern. It was brighter than I thought. Now I'll be ready for whatever moves in the night. He did a little shimmying dance, but I couldn't help but frown. I could only say thank you in a quiet voice. He gave a serious nod and ran off quickly toward the lake. I pulled my boyfriend closer to me. Austin, you can call me crazy, but I don't feel right. We should get going. He gave me a squeeze. Don't worry about it, Ollie. Everything will be fine, and by morning we'll have forgotten about it. I could tell from his tone that what he said was comforting. He wasn't sure if he himself believed that. I took another look at the moon. Trip to camp was stupid. Even the stars were hidden. I was pretty angry about the whole thing, to be honest. It wasn't even that bad to camp. I liked it when things were right, but the night had a bad feeling that was ruining everything. Austin got up and put a new log on the fire, which was making a soft crackling sound, and the logs were starting to turn to ash. Suddenly, a scream that made my blood boil cut right through the night and into my soul. I'll never forget the sound of pure fear. Austin jumped to his feet quickly. Tyler ran down the hill where the sound was coming from, his heart beating fast. I grabbed my flashlight and ran after him, ignoring the people who were happy to stay with her. He had a head start of 10 yards, but that quickly grew until he hit the wood line. As the uneven ground slowed him down, I was able to catch up to him a little. I quickly turned on my light and ran after him. That scary feeling of evil right on the edge of my senses by Tyler. He yelled his name over and over, and I'd never heard him sound so scared before. The only sound we heard in the woods was the crunch of twigs and sticks under our feet. We spread out a little bit and looked everywhere for our friend. I couldn't find him, even though he was taking the same route I was. I kept looking until I saw a duck-shaped shadow behind a tree. My blood ran cold. Austin. I don't think he heard me. I was very scared. I tried to move my legs, but nothing happened. My light was directly on that tree, but nothing came out from behind it, but I could feel that something was there. I said Austin's name once more. This time he came quickly. What's the matter? I had trouble getting my words out. Behind that tree, I think I saw a shadow. He looked at the tree briefly, and then put his hand on my shoulder. It's going to be fine, honey. Right now, your mind is your worst enemy. Don't fall for its tricks. When I took a deep breath, a rush of adrenaline went through my body. Then I noticed how Charities were yelling very loudly to get our attention. Who could blame her? She sounded scared. He turned me around to look into my eyes and said, "Look, you should go check on Charity and tell her to calm down. Then come back down here and help me find Tyler." I inhaled deeply and nodded. Then I ran over to the fire. I quickly told myself that I should have worn pants to protect my legs from the bushes. Back at the camp, Charity was close to the fire and keeping an eye out for us. When she saw me, she called my name and ran over to meet me. I was trapped in her death grip. Oh my God, Ollie, what did that mean? Is Tyler okay? I worked quickly to get away from her. Look, Austin is going down there right now to look for him. He sent me up to let you know that everything is okay. I grabbed her shoulders and turned her around to face me. We'll find him, and I'll be back in a minute. I ran back into the woods and ignored her calls for help. Even though it made me feel bad, Tyler needed me more. Even though I felt like something bad was going to happen, I felt brave. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Austin saw me coming and yelled for me to come over. By the time I got to him, I was pretty out of breath and thanking myself for not giving up running after high school. I was still able to say what I wanted to say. Did you look toward the ground? A few feet away, Tyler's broken lantern was lying on the ground. I saw his flashlight and knife, and my clothes and phone were close by, but he wasn't there, which was very strange. There was a small cloud a few feet above the ground. The best way I can describe it is that it looks like fog, but it is very, very dark. It didn't move when I shined my light on it. What? I got on my knees next to the thing. I got goosebumps just from looking at it. It might have been crazy, but there was something scary about it. I turned my head quickly toward the sound. Already, Austin had looked in that direction. It looked like he was almost shaking. Ali. What? He inhaled deeply and spoke slowly and softly. What did you say about being able to see shadows? Before I could say anything, my eyes got bigger. We could hear Charity yelling near the campfire. Austin swore and ran as fast as he could to the campsite. I ran after him as quickly as I could. From the tree line, I could see the fire. Even though it was hard to tell, it looked like Charity was wrestling. She was being pulled back by something that felt like an arm of darkness. I ran faster when I heard her scream. She fell behind the log and backward. There were no more screams. Charity? At this point, I was so scared I couldn't believe it. What the hell was going on? It was as if that bad feeling turned into something real and attacked them. Austin was the first to get to the campfire and stop. I went there after a short time. When I saw it, my heart dropped. It was a cloud of darkness hovering just above the ground, like someone had left her flashlight by the campfire. At that point, fear really made me lose my mind. I don't remember everything, but I do remember that I was terrified and flashing my flashlight around the woods quickly. I saw a shadow of 3 people off by the line of trees. Ally Austin reached out and grabbed me. I don't know how long he had been trying to get my attention, but we need to go follow me to the car. Let me go first, and then we'll go get the police, okay? I was about to pass out, but I didn't because I had Austin with me. I'd be able to do it. Both of us started walking quickly down the path to the car. It was probably 200 m away. With my light shadows, I couldn't help but look around. They were small, maybe the size of a possum to the size of a child. They moved quickly, darting between hiding places or just going away. Look at me, baby. I quickly faced him again. I quickly faced him again. I quickly faced him again. I say, run, run. Okay, we were already in a hurry because we were jogging, but he was trying to calm me down. He knew I couldn't move as quickly as he could. I heard branches and sticks breaking and rustling all around us. I went faster, barely keeping my cool. At the edge of the light, a shadow appeared. I yelled out his name to warn him. I saw with my own eyes as this thing pulled on his arm and caught on. When Austin yelled, I ran to get him. As he started to stumble forward, a pitch-black hole opened up in the air. This creature pulled him into the hole. As the whole thing fell apart, his screams of fear went away and were replaced by a black mist. This time I screamed and ran into the woods like a wild animal. I probably shouldn't have done it, but all I could think about was getting away from what I had just seen. I could hear something behind me, like bushes and snapping branches. I could see it from my back. I ran faster than I have ever done before. I don't know how many scrapes and cuts I got, but I kept going. It felt like an age. When I hit a rock, I fell forward and hit the ground. My flashlight went flying away, and sharp rocks cut my arms, hands, and knees. I tried to grab it, but one of those damn shadow things jumped in the way. I kept running as hard as I could, even though my lungs hurt. I don't know if it was just a few seconds or a few minutes later, but everything went dark all of a sudden. The first thing I felt was pain, and now every part of my body hurts. I groaned and opened one eye. Light was coming from somewhere, maybe a window. What do? I felt like I was coming out of a nightmare. Then everything came back to him. I woke up and yelled. After a moment, someone was there to help me feel better. I started to come back to myself. I was lying on a bed in a room or cabin of some kind. A man in a park ranger uniform had his hand on mine. He calmed me down by rubbing my shoulder. Miss, don't worry, just breathe, and everything will be fine. I started to breathe too fast, then too fast again. The room started to spin, and I either fell or put my head on his shoulder. He wasn't sure what to do, but he hugged me. We were like that for a few minutes. After a while, I started to calm down and pay attention to what was going on around me. I looked like I was in a cabin or a ranger station. I had a jacket, but other than that, I was still wearing the swimsuit I had worn the night before. My body hurt. The pain was very bad, and the cuts hurt as a reminder of the night before. Most of them were dressed and had bandages on them. I really did look like hell, miss. Are you all right? We found you passed out near here in the woods. I just stared at him blankly. All the feelings seemed to be replaced by a rush of numbness, as if I weren't even there. He gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. What are you called? Felt like being outside of my body. I wasn't the one talking in my own voice. Allison. In that case, Miss Allison here, you're safe. Can you tell me what's happening? He stopped for a second. Take your time. No hurry. So I did. It took a long time. Even more so because I was already having trouble remembering what happened the night before. After what must have been half an hour, it would come back in a rush of scary pieces. His face showed that he was very sad. I'm glad you're okay, Allison. I know you're telling the truth, even if you find it hard to believe. I just looked at him blankly, with tears in my eyes and no idea what to do. You do? What are you saying? He groaned. He took a bit of bark out of my blonde hair by brushing it. Even though he was old enough to be my father, it gave me some comfort. He took off his ranger hat with a serious face. It shouldn't be public knowledge, but we have a vague idea of what's going on in the shadows. You came across. It's why President Wilson turned this area into a park a century ago. Besides the beauty, it's important to protect the public and find out what's going on out here. He let out a big sigh. These things happen very rarely, and as far as I knew, we had pretty much gotten rid of them, but they're said to have been around since the time of the Native Americans. We honestly don't know what they are. Some people say they are from another world. Some people say it's a miracle. We have no idea. I gave a slow nod, taking everything in. I was really upset, and all the feelings I had over the last 18 hours were too much to handle. So I said nothing. The ranger went on to say, we know a few things about them. They only come out at night when there aren't many stars, because they are drawn to light. I didn't understand. Light. Yes, they are drawn to light. They don't like light and will attack anyone who is near it. When I fell into the hole, it seemed like a long time before I reached the bottom. On the surface, the ground was muddy and soft, but an inch down. The clay was hard and not very forgiving. As I fell, I tipped forward, and my right knee was the first thing to hit and hurt. I rolled onto my back and instinctively grabbed it, even though my left wrist and shoulder hurt and my right wrist was probably broken or at least badly hurt. I had been knocked out, and as I looked around, I could only take short, painful gasps of air. I was in a ditch. No, it wasn't just a hole. It was a pit that had been dug out on purpose and had something put on top of it. I remember hitting it with my foot as I ran away before I could take a step back, and my eyes were watering. I looked up at the circle of light above me. It was a small patch of blue sky that was almost completely hidden by a green canopy. There was a lot of forest here. Since I began hiking in the area last fall, that was what I liked best about it. That feeling of being surrounded by nature and being alone, which was more peaceful than lonely and made me feel more like a part of something than like I was on my own. But then I must have heard something, right? Something was walking through the nearby woods, but it was still out of sight. But as I got closer, the first thing I thought of was a deer. But as it went on, it didn't make sense. As a child, I went hunting with my dad often enough to know that deer make quiet, rustling noises when they're not scared. I had been outside for an hour and hadn't heard any gunshots. This sound was louder, less smooth, and more constant. It sounded like something was crashing through the trees and bushes, possibly from a long way away. I had a panicked thought of a bear, but I tried to get rid of it as soon as I could. Sure, but it's a long shot, who knew? Maybe it was a running deer or any of a dozen other animals that, when they wanted to, could make a lot of noise in a quiet forest. Or maybe there were other hikers out there too. I've never known for sure who owned the land. Just that it was part of a 1,000-acre wooded area that backed up to a state park. I'd been coming out there for 6 months. I haven't seen any hunters, hikers, or other people, but that didn't make it. Off to my right, I caught a glimpse of a moving shadow. What happened? Was it? Someone slowed down. I kept an eye on the spot where I thought I might see movement. The figure then came out from behind a tree, and I tried not to scream. It was a person, but not a hiker or a hunter. They were wearing a long black hooded poncho or cloak that was trailing behind them as they started moving again. That was strange enough. It hadn't rained all day and was unusually warm for the time of year, but then I saw their face, or what would have been their face. From far away it was hard to tell, but I thought they were running with a dark mask on, maybe a gas mask. My heart was racing. I bent over where I was. They were getting closer, but they were running at an angle that would put them on my trail about a half-mile back. It was possible that they hadn't seen me at all, and I wanted to keep it that way, watching from between the branches of a bush, whoever they were and whatever they were and whatever they were doing. I caught glimpses of the figure as it ran toward me at a lurching, wavering pace, which was made even scarier by the dark, continuous shape of the coverings it wore. Between the length of the poncho and the things that stood between us, I couldn't even see arms, and I could just barely make out a hint of legs. Just a black shape that moved through the woods like a ghost chasing something that couldn't be seen, unless that something couldn't be seen was me. I thought it hadn't noticed me, but how did I know? Did I really want to wait for it to get closer so it would pass by, or would it be better to move slowly down the path while it was far enough away that I would probably miss any small movement? Chicken nuts? I chose the second option and crouched slowly forward, maybe 100 yards or more ahead. There were a lot of fir trees in a thicket. If I could get past them and put their bulk between us, I'd have a better chance of moving forward without them seeing me. I moved a few more feet and then stopped to see where the spectre was. Was it still going in the same direction, or had it taken a different route? Oh God. It had stopped and was looking right at me. It started running again all of a sudden. It was jerking the gate faster and more frantically as it came right at me. I thought I could almost hear excited groans from behind the mask, and I heard myself moan as I stood up and started to run. I'm in good shape, but I'd been hiking for 2 hours already, and this was a forest I'd never been in before. I had to find a good balance between my need for speed and making sure I didn't trip or get lost. When I looked back again, I could see that the dark figure had reached my path and was getting closer. I grunted in fear and pushed myself harder to put more distance between us. When I hit the pile of furs, I turned to the right, hoping that the change in direction would throw it off. In that direction, the woods were thicker and darker, and it would only take a few yards for me to be hard to see from far away. When I looked back, I didn't see any sign of the other, but that didn't mean much by itself. The trees blocked my view, so I had to rely more on sounds and make less noise. Slowing down was hard, but I started with a quick trot and then a softer, slower walk. The path ahead was mostly dark, with a few bright spots here and there, but I thought I still had a general idea of where I was going. For now, my main concern was for any signs that I was being followed, such as flashes of flailing darkness or the crashing thud of the spectre running close behind me. I did hear some noises, but at first they didn't seem to be getting closer, and as I moved on I could tell they were getting weaker. When I turned around to look again, I didn't see anything moving behind me. Good. I was probably 4 miles from the park's edge and 2 more from my car. I could get there in an hour if I sped up. As I started to jog, my steps got louder, but I tried to be as quiet as I could, and the extra speed seemed to be worth the slight increase in noise. It was probably 5 minutes before I heard a loud crack behind me. It was probably just a branch breaking, but I still sped up, and my heart rate went up more than it had when I put my foot on the ground. That didn't make sense. I fell through the dark because it wasn't solid ground, getting to one of the pit's walls. There, I dug my fingers into the dirt. I was able to stand, but as soon as I put any weight on my right leg, a sharp pain shot up my spine and made me gasp for air. It didn't matter anyway. The walls were made of the same hard clay and went up 15 feet all the way around. I imagined the pit from above as an oval, and as I looked around, I noticed something near where I had landed. Nearby, a brown tarp lay among a mess of branches and leaves that had been covering the hole. This pit wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a trap. Who would do that? And why was it made for a certain purpose? It had to work out. What was the point of digging a trap in the middle of nowhere if that wasn't the case? How likely was that? Someone would just walk into it? People dug pits to catch animals, but maybe it wasn't even for them. Even big things that tigers could climb? But there were no tigers out here. Instead, there were coyotes and deer. Normal forest animals were in me, and then a shadow fell over me. When I gasped and looked up, the hooded ghost was standing at the edge of the pit and looking down at me. After all, it was a gas mask, and I could hear screams from behind it. It moved around excitedly for a moment, then threw itself into the pit and landed on its side just a few feet away. I was yelling at the time, but as I watched the thing twist and turn in the mud, I stopped. I too was getting more and more confused. Why did it just come down here and join me? It looked like the fall hurt, and I still couldn't see its arms through the muddy black poncho it was wearing. It had just finished crawling to the far wall, where it groaned and slowly sat up. Still, I felt pain in my wrist and couldn't trust anything here. I reached into my pocket for my phone while keeping an eye on the dark spot on the far wall and looking down. I felt a lurch in my stomach. The screen was broken and hitting the power button did nothing. I looked back at the ghost again. It didn't move. It just sat there and watched me. And was it me crying my heart out? I moved a little bit. Hello? What's going on? What the F is happening? Just more sobbing. As it moved its head, the hood moved slowly back and forth. I was scared to touch it, but I had nothing else to do. Maybe they were hurt enough that they wouldn't fight me, and if they had a phone or something, I could at least try to call for help. As I pulled the mask up, I held my dead phone in my throbbing right hand. It was a woman. A girl, maybe 20 years old, was crying and looking at me with wild red eyes. She was pleading with me, and her nose was flaring as she took quick, panicked breaths. She didn't have any other choice either. Her lips were stuck together. I took a deep breath. Mum, what? What's going on? I saw that the poncho had a seam down the front that went to the waist and was held together by classy buttons. Handshaking. I pulled on the top button until it came off. Under the poncho, the girl's arms were tied behind her, and the way the left one was bent made it look like it was badly broken, either from the fall or from something before a large dog collar. One of those shock collars with electrodes was tight around her neck, and a black written note on green paper was stuck to her chest. Behind me, there is only one chute. I heard the sound of a car coming up behind me, and as I looked up toward the opening, I felt a thrill of hope. It could have been a park ranger or a hunter who heard us. I wasn't going to take a chance on them riding by without stopping. So I started to scream and yell at the top of my lungs as I stared into the light. The engine noise got louder as my voice got higher, and I was relieved when I heard the engine shut off just above the pit. We can't get out of here. Help us, please. No one answered, and I was about to yell again when I saw a big white hose creeping over the hole's edge. They might have thought they could use the hose as a rope to pull us out, but then the water stopped coming out of the hose and a clear liquid started to trickle out of it and then pour out, splashing the ground. As it got closer and closer, I could smell it in my nose. Almost right away, as the water started to pool and splash farther and farther, a drop landed on my shoe and started to sizzle. Oh my God, it was sour. Acid was being poured down here. My shoe was still hissing as another drop landed on the leg of my pants. The drop ate through my jeans and burned my calf. I pulled up the leg of my pants, but another drop landed on my arm. I screamed in pain as the skin there began to blister right away. I couldn't think straight, and not just because of the pain and fear. The fumes were getting worse as the pool got bigger, and I could feel my lungs getting tighter as I breathed in the chemicals with each gasp. Please, please don't do this. No one answered, and the flow of water from the hose got stronger. We would get it. Within a few minutes, the girl was squealing again behind me, but at the top of the hole, my attack tension was at a new level. Next to the hose, a small metal ladder with steel cords and bar steps had been rolled over the edge. As I looked on in shock, the hose was lifted and put on top of the ladder. As the acid poured into the pit, it splashed the rungs. As I turned back to the girl, I heard the car start up again and leave. No one was going to help us. We were going to die horrible, painful deaths down here, with only one way to get out, just another way of getting burned to death. I swallowed and looked down at the green note again. When I saw that there was only one parachute, I started to cry. I slowly reached forward to get the gas mask out of the poncho's hood, where it had fallen. "I'm so sorry," I said to her in a whisper as my throat burned. I'd like to say. I took off the poncho carefully, but I was scared. There wasn't enough time, and she knew enough to try and fight back. I didn't want to hurt her, but if I said I didn't, I'd be lying. When she started to move, I realized I was holding her broken arm too tightly. We went to the pool. I made sure to look down before I got to the stream of water coming from the hose, so I could button up the poncho that went around the edge. I thought that the poncho wouldn't work as a last cruel trick from whoever was behind everything, but it seemed to be holding, even though I could hear the bottoms of my shoes popping and feel needle, sharp pains as acid splashed onto the parts of my legs that weren't covered. The poncho seemed to stand up to it pretty well. When I grabbed the first rung through the skin of my covering, my body fought against it, but my desperate fear and adrenaline were louder. I made it to the top and quickly took off my poncho, mask and shoes. As I looked around, my jeans and shoes were still on fire, so I took them off next. No one else was up there, and when I looked back down into the pit, the girl was still there, not moving. Perhaps the smell finally got to her. At the end, she might not wake up again. By the time I got back to the park slot and used the emergency call phone, it was getting dark. 20 minutes later, I was in an ambulance, and 2 hours later, a confused detective was asking me questions while I tried as hard as I could to get out of the fog of painkillers. I told him what little I knew, which wasn't much. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't deny that I was hurt, and they said they would look into everything. When I call, they say they went through the woods 2 months ago. But because the land is so big and my directions were so vague, they haven't been able to find any acid-filled tiger pits. Then yesterday, another detective who was working on the case called me, and I was able to get her to admit that they had found more than 24 holes that had been filled in. There were no signs of bodies or acid, though. There were only deep holes that had just been filled in. Then she asked me the question I'd been dreading ever since I ran away from the tiger pit into the dark. How come you didn't stop the acid? How come you didn't stop the acid? What? Well, you said that when you got to the top you didn't see anyone. Yes, sure. You say there was a trailer with a big plastic tank on it up there. This was what kept the acid from running out of the hose and into the whole thing. Yeah, right. So why did you keep using acid once you got to the top? Could still have helped that girl. You told her it was almost there at that point. I didn't have a way to turn it off. I looked, but I couldn't find a valve to turn it off. A pause, and then all right. Why not just move the hose? Even if you couldn't stop the acid from coming down, you could have stopped it from falling on the poor girl, right? I took a bite. I guess I wasn't that surprised. Okay, I was hurting a lot. Her voice was getting stronger, no doubt. At the hospital I saw pictures of you. You were crazy, but not so crazy. In the dark, you couldn't walk miles to a phone. Not so bad that a hose couldn't be moved a few feet, if what you say is true. Now I was crying. I know that everything is true, but I was scared, certainly. What if they continued to watch? They had said there was only one. We couldn't all leave at once. What if I made them angry and they came back, returned for me? I could hear disgust in her voice. I see. So my partner doesn't really believe you. If I'm being honest, I'd say that the land is technically state land. Someone died without any living relatives a few years ago, and no one has tried to buy the house since then. There's also no real reason to think that some crazy person has been sneaking out there and setting up traps. Either. We've been out there twice with dogs and rangers. But other than the loose dirt in places that the corpse dogs have checked without hitting, there isn't much else to say. By the way, there's nothing else besides your word to back up what you say. Some chemical burns are shaking. I still didn't know what to say. I like to think that I have a better sense of what's going on than he does. Even so, I think I believe you. We'd both be better off if it weren't true. What are you saying? Well, just give it some thought. Based on what you said, and assuming that the holes we found were related, what are the chances that you were in a remote wood where a crazy killer was torturing that poor girl? It sounds like this killer let this girl go who was tied up and couldn't talk because of this mask and poncho. Get up and run around for a while in the woods. Why? And what kept her from running away like you did? I forced a shaky breath out. I'm not sure. Maybe the collar shocked her if she moved out of a certain range, so she stayed in one place until she fell into a pit. The pit wasn't just for her though, was it? What? You did say that there was a note on her though. Something like only one person can leave, right? Isn't there only one parachute? Yeah, right. So the person who found the girl and opened the poncho was the one who was meant to get that message. Right, I guess. But how would they know that there would be someone else? I could feel my shame, anger, and fear coming back, and I was getting more and more angry, like they were after I got out of the trap and for a few days after that. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm just thinking out loud. But what if falling into that pit wasn't just a matter of chance? What are you saying? What if it didn't have anything to do with the girl in the poncho? Everything was about you. They might have been following you, watching you, and learning about your habits to figure out how to get you to go where they wanted. That makes no sense at all. What were they thinking? Why would they tie a girl up, put a gas mask and poncho on her, drop her into a pit, and then fill the pit with acid? Or do you still think she was the one who jumped in? I know, I think she was pushed in, probably. Well, if we're going to believe everything you said, why should we think they have a good reason for doing any of this? Maybe they're just crazy people who want to hurt people. As I looked out the window at the street below, I could feel my skin getting wet. I might have tried to end the call, but she started talking again. So maybe this cruel person really wants you. Maybe they've been slowly changing your life in small ways for months, waiting to see if you'd notice, if you'd see the dark thread that had been woven into your life. If you'd finally see them, "Detective, I need to go. Thank you for the heads up." And maybe the colour wasn't a fence, but a bit in the mouth to steer a little pony when needed. Or maybe, just maybe, the girl in the poncho wasn't even the one chasing you the whole time. Maybe the monster put you in that pit and helped you burn that poor girl while she was trying to scream. This is, excuse me, but what was your name again? I'm going to have to talk to your boss. I said that my name was Brown, Browning, Blake, or Browning. I don't know who you are. Does it really make a difference who I am? You don't have the right question. What's the right question? Where am I? You're nuts. F, I'll call the police. If you do that, they won't be able to find you here when they come. What do you want people to find when they come? What? She laughed softly. It's not much. Just answer one more question. Now, what do you think of me? Thanks for hearing about our lives. If you want to help us out, please hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell.